The biggest decision I had to make was since I was going to lose my bladder, what would be the replacement?
We did it together. And he talked to me about everything, and we discussed the pros and cons about all of them. I remember him asking me, he says, would you be okay if I had a bag hanging off of me? I said, I don't care. I'm sure a lot of people need to hear that because they get so scared of it. And it is frightening.
And there's a lot of community support out there for people who are in the ostomy world. So my story started off like late October of 2021. I noticed that there was some blood in my urine, but it wasn't consistent. It was just a little here, a little there. And being a typical guy, of course, I just kind of ignored it and figured, well, that'll go away on its own. I had experienced something similar to that many, many years ago when I used to run a lot and do a lot of physical exercise. So I figured, okay, must be something related to that. But then, of course, my days of running half marathons are way over. So I was kind of in a little bit of denial. And he did a culture on me and he said, no, it's not an infection. And then he referred me to a urologist. He was going to schedule me for a scope. But at that time, Heike and I were getting ready to go on a cruise. So I said, well, the scope's going to have to wait. And then while we were on the cruise, the bleeding got like ridiculous. I mean, I was seeing blood everywhere.
Urinating blood.
I was just urinating blood and it was not good. They did a scope on me. He's kind of pushing his camera around and then all of a sudden he kind of pauses and he says very nonchalantly, like, oh yeah, that's cancer. And I was a little bit like, what? Then I think he realized, like, I can hear you. I'm in the room, right? I mean, he sees it every day. So I guess for him, it's like no big deal. He sees that every day. But for me, who's never had anything like that, to hear, oh yeah, that's cancer. Me sitting there for the first time getting scoped, right?
It was interesting with John. He's not a very emotional guy, kind of typical, I guess. But, he came home and he stood there and kind of did the same thing for me and said, it's cancer. I'm like, what are you talking about? He gets on Google and starts doing all the research, taking his labs apart, trying to figure it out.
I was originally diagnosed what they call T1. In other words, the cancer had not gone into the bladder wall yet, into the muscle. It was non-muscle invasive. And he said, so good news is it's non-muscle invasive. The treatment for that is fairly simple. We'll schedule you for these treatments and it's all outpatient. But he said, but just to be on the safe side, I'm going to send all your labs up to Johns Hopkins to have them take a close look at it. So Heike and I kind of breathed a big sigh of relief and we're like, okay, well, let's go celebrate.
John and Heike celebrated, believing the worst was behind them, but this was just the beginning.
I was driving in the car and I was kind of pulling up in the neighborhood and I saw my caller ID and I saw it was Johns Hopkins. He goes, hey, are you driving? And I'm like, yeah, I'm just pulling into the driveway. And he goes, okay, well, let me know when you're stopped. And he goes, well, listen, I got your pathology back and actually your lab results show that you are indeed muscle invasive and you have a very aggressive cancer. He goes, we need to get you in right away. We need to get you started on chemotherapy right away and schedule you for radical cystectomy. And I remember kind of sitting there in my car going, wow, it was just a lot to take in literally like 6 minutes. And I know he's a busy doctor and he's got to move on, right? And he just hung up the phone and I just kind of sat in the car and going, wow, that 6 minutes just kind of changed my life.
You get your brain and your heart all set on one thing, what doctors are telling you. But now you've got a whole nother story that's getting a lot deeper and a lot more dangerous, I guess you could say. We don't know what the prognosis is or how he's going to react to chemotherapy and to go through all that.
As overwhelming as removing his bladder was, John's care team prepared him.
He gave me this orange book, and it was from Beacon. And he said, here, there's a great reference here that you can read all about your condition and the treatments. And I just devoured that book. Generally, when I have a problem like that, it's kind of like, okay, let's work the problem. What's the problem? What do I got to do? It was like a godsend to me because, yeah, I was kind of doing all the Dr. Google stuff, but here I got something from a reputable source that peer reviewed by doctors. And I spent a lot of time reviewing that, just read it cover to cover. And it really kind of gave me peace of mind, like, okay, this is what I'm dealing with.
Knowledge is power. And understanding that has been an incredible weight lifted off our shoulders, because not only did you find it yourself, looking at it, you understood it, and you can reread it over and over and over again, take it different ways, maybe go a little bit this way. It's really served both of us very well.
Removing his bladder came with a decision. What would replace his bladder?
I decided to go with the ileostomy because it's kind of more old school.
I think ultimately the decision was based on what's your greatest success chance. This is the first, bout with cancer that I think either one of us have dealt with in our families. It's not in my family, and in John either. So it's a scary scenario when you start looking ahead and what's coming, and you're expecting the worst.
There was also a mass on my spleen as well. It was decided then that when they do my radical cystectomy, they were going to do a splenectomy at the same time.
He said that it's going to be a long one. We got two different surgeons coming in, one for his bladder, one for his spleen, and it was going to take a while. So I was prepared for that. Seeing him afterwards was, obviously a godsend. He came out fine.
It's always good when you wake up after a surgery because
I made it.
I made it. I had this gigantic scar down, like I was like a gutted deer, I just straight down the middle, and I had no abdomen muscles because they cut through so much of it. I remember just trying to sit up and do that was very painful.
I'd come to visit him every day. It's like, why don't you turn the TV on or something? He's sitting in this room all alone. Why aren't you turning the TV? Nope, he just rested here.
I don't know what it was, but it was probably the only time in my life that I just had no media or anything for hours on end, and I was just kind of with myself.
Days later, John finally got the news he and Heike had been hoping for.
I got really good news after a few days after I got home. Dr. Cates told me that all the cultures, my lymph nodes and all that, they didn't detect any cancer, so they felt pretty confident that they got it all.
And the spleen was clean. Once he got home, it was so much better because I get to be the caretaker. And I love doing that. So what do you need, John? I'm right here.
She got me set up in the basement there on the recliner, and
that's where I lived for a while.
That's where I lived for a while because I couldn't really go up and down the steps as much. I just needed to stay in one place.
Just having him at home made all the difference, and my work, allowed me to be home for him as much as I needed to. And you really recovered quickly.
I have surveillance, of course. So I get CT scans and ultrasounds. They're in blood tests to make sure that the cancer hasn't come back. They call it Scanxiety, right? Every time you go in for a scan, you don't know what's going to happen. And for the first few, I had a little bit, but now I feel just really confident that, not to get smug or anything, but it's like I feel like I'm through this. And if it does come back, like I told Heike, we'll just deal with it.
There's definitely a level of stress and anxiety, but then you get the results, everything's clear. We just take each one with it's a blessing. You just thank God that you've gotten this far and you've gotten through another scan and everything's good.
I think so much of your recovery is really your mindset. I believed that I was going to get through this and I was going to give it my best. And I know it can always come back, but I don't think about that. I think about moving forward. Can it come back? Of course it can come back, but that's not what I'm going to worry about. What I'm focused on now is today, and if I get fortunate to get tomorrow. Through my journey, I've met a lot of people that have been on the journey through various groups. And it's really inspired me to give back to the community. I was in the Navy, and being a part of the military, veterans tend to get bladder cancer at a much, much higher rate than civilian population. And part of my work now is I've received a grant to create an awareness campaign amongst veterans to get them, make sure that they get checked out and not ignore the signs as well. And I want to make sure that the guys out there and the girls out there know that, hey, if you see anything, you need to get on it. Don't ignore it.